The golden leaves crunch beneath your feet, but there's something wrong with the sound. It's too dry, too brittle, like stepping on the bones of butterflies. You stand at the base of what should have been salvation itself, the Haligtree, and everywhere you look, promise has turned to decay. The air here tastes of sweetness gone sour, of honey left too long in the sun until it crystallizes into something sharp enough to cut. Welcome, lore seekers, to another deep dive with Keen 7 lore, where today we unravel perhaps the most disturbing transformation in all of Elden Ring's mythology. The story of how the most beloved demigod became the most terrifying puppet master the lands between has ever known. Look closer at those withered branches above you. Each one was meant to cradle the desperate and the downtrodden, to offer sanctuary to those the Golden Order had cast aside. The Albinorics who dragged themselves across continents on failing legs, the misbegotten who knew only chains and contempt, they all came here following whispers of a golden prince who promised them belonging. Now their corpses dot the branches like ornaments on a dying tree, still reaching toward a light that was never truly meant for them. This is Miquella's legacy, though not the one he intended. Or perhaps, and this is where our journey grows dark indeed, perhaps this withering was always inevitable once we understand what Miquella truly sought to become. You see those statues scattered throughout the Haligtree's remains. Twin figures locked in eternal embrace, Miquella and Millennia, rendered in stone as idealized versions of themselves. The sculptors gave Miquella the body of a man, tall and graceful, freed from his curse of eternal youth. They gave Millennia wholeness, untouched by rot, her flesh unmarred by the scarlet bloom. These statues represent the dream, the future Miquella was supposedly building toward. But dreams have a way of revealing our deepest desires, and Miquella's dreams, we now know, were never as pure as that golden hair suggested. The story begins, as all tragedies do, with love. Miquella loved his sister Millennia with a devotion that transcended the bonds of mere family. When the Golden Order fundamentalism, that perfect mathematical expression of the greater will's design, failed to cure her scarlet rot, something broke inside the young Empyrean. Not his faith, not exactly. Faith implies trust, and Miquella had moved beyond trust into the realm of determination. If the existing order could not save his sister, he would forge a new one. If the gods themselves stood in his way, he would become something greater than gods. Born cursed, the twins understood suffering in ways their siblings never could. Millennia carried the scarlet rot, that flowering poison that transformed her into a walking apocalypse, while Miquella bore the burden of eternal childhood, his brilliant mind trapped forever in a body that would never mature. Imagine possessing the intellect to reshape reality itself, but being forever perceived as a child, your ideas dismissed, your authority questioned, your very personhood diminished to something cute and harmless. This curse shaped everything Miquella would become, though not in the way most would expect. Where others saw limitation, Miquella discovered opportunity. A child's face, after all, inspires trust. A child's voice speaks of innocence. And who would suspect a child of weaving chains from compassion itself? The Golden Epitaph sword tells us much about Miquella's early character. Forged to commemorate his brother Godwyn, the blade carries a prayer, a desperate wish that death might someday be restored to the lands between. This was Miquella before his transformation, still believing that compassion alone could heal the world's wounds. He saw Godwyn's undeath, that horrible half-life, as the Prince of Death, and his response was to create something beautiful from grief. The sword stands as perhaps the last pure expression of Miquella's original nature, before his experiments began their slow corruption of noble intent into something far more sinister. But prayers and wishes weren't enough. They never are when faced with the inexorable advance of divine disease. Millennia's rot was spreading, not just through her body, but through her very being. She was becoming less person and more vector, a walking catastrophe waiting to bloom. The fundamentalists offered equations and incantations. The Golden Order promised that all things could be conjoined through regression and causality. but mathematics cannot cure what the outer gods have wrought. This realization drove Miquella to his first great experiment. If he could not work within the system, he would create his own. Thus was born Unalloyed Gold, Miquella's answer to the Golden Order's failures. Where the Erdtree's gold carried the greater will's influence, unalloyed gold existed in perfect isolation, untouched by any outer god's meddling. Think about the audacity of this concept. A demigod, himself born of the greater will system, creating a form of divinity that explicitly rejected all outside influence. It would be like a river deciding to flow upward, defying not just gravity but the very nature of water itself. Yet Miquella succeeded, at least partially. His needles could push back the scarlet rot, could even reverse the Lord of Frenzied Flame's consumption of a tarnished who had inherited the Three Fingers' scorching embrace. The needles themselves deserve our attention, for they represent Miquella's methodology in miniature. Each one had to be crafted with absolute precision, a single flaw rendering them useless. Commander O'Neill carries a broken needle through the swamp of Aeonia, desperately seeking someone who might repair what Miquella had made. The needle's presence there, in that scarlet hellscape where millennia bloomed for the first time, tells us that even in the midst of catastrophic war, someone believed Miquella's cure might still save the day. That faith was misplaced, though not entirely wrong. The needles could provide temporary relief, as Millicent's journey proves, but they were bandages on a severed artery, buying time rather than offering true healing. If you're finding value in this exploration into the darker corners of Elden Ring's lore so far, consider subscribing to support the channel and join our growing community of lore enthusiasts. Your support truly makes these deep investigations possible, allowing us to piece together the intricate puzzles from software has hidden throughout their worlds. Now, let's delve deeper into how Miquella's noble attempts at healing transformed into something far more ambitious and terrifying. The Haligtree stands as Miquella's greatest and most tragic experiment. Unable to cure his sister through conventional means, unable to mature beyond his childlike form despite centuries of life, Miquella decided to grow his own Erdtree. Not a mere sapling blessed by the greater will, but something entirely new, watered with his own Empyrean blood. Every drop that fell from his veins onto those roots carried his essence, his will, his desperate need to create a sanctuary free from the influence of the outer gods. The tree grew, reaching toward the sky with branches that seemed to glow with their own inner light, and word spread throughout the lands between of a haven where all were welcome. The pilgrimage routes to the Haligtree tell their own story of devotion and desperation. Through the freezing winds of the consecrated snowfield, across invisible bridges in the liturgical town of Ordina, the Forsaken traveled toward Miquella's promise. The medallion system he established wasn't just about secrecy, it was about commitment. Split a medallion in half, hide the pieces in distant corners of the world, and only those truly dedicated would find their way to his door. This was social engineering disguised as security, a way to ensure that those who arrived were already predisposed to believe, already desperate enough to accept whatever Miquella offered. Loretta, once a knight of Korea, abandoned her post to become the Haligtree's guardian. Her transformation from serving the Carian royalty to protecting Miquella's sanctuary speaks to the young Empyrean's persuasive power. She didn't just guard a tree, she guarded an idea, a future where the oppressed might find peace. The Albinorics especially flocked to the Haligtree, their first-generation forms failing, their bodies betraying them as the artificial life within them slowly unwound. Miquella promised them not just shelter but purpose, transformation, a chance to become something more than the Golden Order's failed experiments. But here's where Miquella's true nature begins to reveal itself. The Oracle Envoys, those corpulent beings who herald the arrival of a new god or the return of an ancient one, appeared at the Haligtree. Their presence means one thing: someone was attempting to achieve true godhood. Not the demigod status Miquella already possessed, but genuine divinity, the kind that could reshape reality according to its whims. The Haligtree wasn't just meant to be a sanctuary or even a replacement for the Erdtree. It was meant to be a cocoon for Miquella's metamorphosis, a divine incubator where he could finally shed his cursed form and emerge as something greater. The cocoon itself represents the pivotal moment where Miquella's experiments crossed from desperate innovation into calculated manipulation. By embedding himself within the Halichtree's heart, by literally becoming one with his creation, Miquella attempted to force the maturation that nature had denied him. He wrapped himself in threads of his own making, each strand woven from Empyrean blood and unalloyed gold, creating a chrysalis that should have been impenetrable. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Feed the tree with his blood, let the tree grow mighty, then use that accumulated power to transform himself into his adult form, free from his curse and capable of ascending to true godhood. But someone was watching. Someone whose own desires aligned perfectly with Miquella's vulnerability. Mohg, Lord of Blood, the omen twin cast into the sewers beneath Lendel, had been nursing his own dreams of divinity. The established narrative, the one we all believed before the shadow of the Erdtree expansion revealed the truth, painted Mohg as a kidnapper and violator, stealing the slumbering Empyrean to raise as his god and consort. The reality proved far more disturbing. Mohg wasn't the predator in this story. He was prey, carefully selected and groomed by Miquella himself. The evidence was always there if we knew how to look. Bewitching branches, crafted from sacramental buds that grow from Miquella's blood, have the power to make enemies fight as allies, not through fear or coercion, but through genuine affection, turning foes into friends with a single gesture. This was Miquella's true gift, refined through experimentation into an art form. He could make anyone love him, trust him, die for him, and they would do so believing it was their own choice. The most insidious form of control isn't forcing someone to obey, it's making them want to obey, rewriting their very desires to align with your own. Miquella needed two things from Mohg: access to the realm of shadow where the real ascension to godhood could take place, and a vessel strong enough to house the soul of General Radahn. Yes, Radahn, the Star Scourge, the mighty demigod who held back the very stars themselves. This revelation recontextualizes everything we thought we knew about the Shattering War and its aftermath. Malenia didn't march to Caelid to claim a great rune or eliminate a rival. She went there on her brother's behalf, to kill Radahn and free his soul from Miquella's use. When she whispered, "Miquella awaits thee, all-promised consort," before unleashing her scarlet Aeonia, she wasn't taunting. She was delivering a message, reminding Radahn of a vow made long ago. The Battle of Aeonia, that cataclysmic confrontation that turned Caelid into a scarlet hellscape, was never about victory in any conventional sense. Malenia knew she couldn't truly defeat Radahn in honorable combat. The Star Scourge was possibly the mightiest warrior among the demigods, his gravitational magic allowing him to fight with a strength that defied physics itself. But she didn't need to win. She needed to kill him, or at least destroy his mind thoroughly enough that his soul could be claimed. The first bloom of her scarlet Aeonia accomplished exactly that, reducing Radahn to a mindless beast who consumed corpses on the battlefield, his great soul trapped in a rotting shell until some tarnished could grant him an honorable death. Sir Ansbach, Mohg's most loyal knight, eventually pieced together what had truly happened. His lord hadn't kidnapped anyone. Mohg had been enchanted, his mind twisted by Miquella's influence, until he believed that stealing the Empyrean from the Haligtree was his own idea. The blood rituals Mohg performed, attempting to elevate Miquella to godhood through sanguine communion, were all part of Miquella's design. Every drop of blood Mohg shared with that cocoon was calculated, measured, part of a grander scheme that the Lord of Blood could never have comprehended. Mohg died believing he would become a consort to a new god, never realizing he was merely a stepping stone and a future vessel for someone else's soul. The cocoon in Mohgwyn Palace appeared withered, drained, seemingly dead. Mohg's blood magic had apparently failed to elevate the sleeping Empyrean within. But when we return after defeating Mohg, the cocoon is empty and a withered arm reaches out from within, suggesting Miquella had already departed. This was the moment Miquella crossed into the realm of shadow, using Mohg's death and the blood-soaked ground of the dynasty as a gateway. The withered arm wasn't a sign of failure, but of transformation. Miquella was shedding his physical form, abandoning the flesh that had constrained him for so long. The realm of shadow holds the truth of all demigod ascensions, the place where Marika herself became a god through communion at the gate of divinity. Miquella's path through this realm is marked by crosses of his own making, each one representing something he chose to abandon. At one cross, he left behind his flesh, becoming more spirit than substance. At another, he abandoned his strength, the physical power that had always been denied him anyway. His lineage went next, the golden heritage that tied him to Marika and the Golden Order. Each abandonment was deliberate, calculated, stripping away everything that might interfere with his ascension. But the most significant abandonment was Saint Trina, his other self. Like Marika and Radahn, Miquella existed as a dual entity, with Saint Trina representing his aspect of sleep and dreams. In the stone coffin fissure, we find Saint Trina's essence, abandoned and left to die in a pool of deep sleep. She begs us to kill Miquella, to stop him from becoming a god, because she alone understands what he's becoming. The gentle aspect of sleep, the part of Miquella that brought peaceful rest to the suffering, had to be cast aside because gods cannot afford gentleness. They must be absolute, unwavering, capable of imposing their will upon reality itself without hesitation or doubt. The followers. Miquella, charmed throughout his journey, began to experience something horrific as he divested himself of his former nature. Leda, his most devoted follower, started to feel the charm breaking, describing it like awakening from a dream to find yourself somewhere you don't remember traveling to. Others went mad entirely, unable to reconcile their actions under the charm with their true selves. They had murdered for him, abandoned families for him, betrayed everything they once held dear, and now they couldn't even remember why it had seemed so important. This is the true horror of Miquella's compassion. It was never really compassion at all, just control wearing a kinder face. The crosses throughout the realm of shadow form a pilgrimage route toward the gate of divinity, each one bringing Miquella closer to his goal. By the time he reaches the gate, he has abandoned everything that made him mortal, everything that made him fallible, everything that made him capable of doubt or mercy. What emerges from that communion is not Miquella as we knew him, but something new and terrible, a nascent god of compassion whose love would embrace the world so tightly it would crush all free will beneath its weight. The promised age of compassion sounds beautiful when described in abstract terms. A world without suffering, without conflict, where all beings exist in perfect harmony under Miquella's gentle guidance. But examine the mechanism by which this age would be achieved, and the horror becomes apparent. Every living being would be charmed, their minds rewritten to adore Miquella and, by extension, each other. Not through understanding or growth or genuine emotional connection, but through magical compulsion that strips away the very essence of choice. It would be peace, certainly, but the peace of the grave, where no one moves because no one can. Radahn's role in this grand design stretches back to their childhood, long before the shattering, long before any of them understood what they would become. Young Radahn, mighty even as a child, apparently made a vow with Miquella. The exact nature of this vow remains deliberately ambiguous, and that ambiguity is crucial to understanding the full scope of Miquella's manipulation. Did Radahn agree to become Miquella's consort willingly, understanding what it would mean? Or was this another charm, a child's innocent promise twisted into something binding by Miquella's supernatural influence? The armor of young Radahn, which we can find in the realm of shadow, shows him as he was before he became the Star Scourge, before he grew to giant size through his admiration of Godfrey. This younger Radahn might have been more susceptible to Miquella's influence, might have made promises he didn't fully understand. The vow between them, whatever its original form, became the cornerstone of Miquella's ascension plan. He needed a lord to stand beside him as a god, someone powerful enough to enforce his will upon the world, and Radahn's might made him the perfect candidate. But Radahn clearly had second thoughts. His mastery of gravitational magic wasn't just about military might. He used it to hold back the stars themselves, preventing the fate that Miquella's ascension would require. The stars in Elden Ring carry destiny itself, and by holding them in place, Radahn essentially pressed pause on the cosmic order that would allow Miquella to achieve godhood. This is why millennia had to march to Caelid. This is why she had to unleash the Scarlet Aeonia even though it meant damning an entire region to rot. Radahn's defiance had to be ended, his soul freed from his resistant body so it could be claimed and reformed. The resurrection itself is perhaps Miquella's most disturbing experiment. Using Mohg's body as a vessel, Miquella somehow transplanted Radahn's soul into the omen's flesh, creating a chimeric being that was neither fully Radahn nor Mohg, but something caught between them. The horns of an omen sprouting from the star scourge's head, the blood magic mixing with gravitational sorcery, all of it speaks to the fundamental wrongness of this fusion. This wasn't healing or helping, it was puppeteering, using the dead flesh of one demigod to house the enslaved soul of another. In the final confrontation at Enir Elim, we see the culmination of all Miquella's experiments. He appears not as the eternally young boy we expected, but as a figure of terrible beauty, his curse finally overcome through sheer force of will and divine power. Riding on Radahn's shoulders like a conquering hero, he speaks of the coming age of compassion with genuine belief in its righteousness. This is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Miquella. He truly believes he's saving everyone. In his mind, free will is the source of all suffering. Choice leads to conflict, and the only way to create lasting peace is to remove the possibility of discord entirely. The tarnished role in stopping Miquella becomes not just heroic, but necessary for the preservation of free will itself. Every other ending in Elden Ring, from the basic Age of Fracture to the Age of Stars, maintains some element of choice for the beings living in the world. Even the frenzied flame which burns everything to ash at least grants the mercy of oblivion. But Miquella's ending would trap everyone in eternal stasis, forever loving, forever peaceful, forever stripped of the agency that makes them truly alive. It would be existence without life, consciousness without thought, being without becoming. The tragedy of Miquella lies not in his failure, but in how his noble intentions curdled into tyranny. He began as perhaps the most genuinely good-hearted of the demigods, seeking to cure his sister, to shelter the oppressed, to right the wrongs of a broken world. Every experiment started from a place of compassion. The unalloyed gold needles were meant to ease suffering. The Haligtree was meant to provide sanctuary. Even his charm ability might have originally manifested as a way to bring comfort to the grieving and peace to the troubled. But power without restraint corrupts absolutely, and Miquella's curse of eternal youth meant he never developed the wisdom that comes from experiencing life's full cycle. Consider the parallel between Miquella and his mother, Marika. Both sought to create perfect worlds according to their vision. Both were willing to sacrifice anything and anyone to achieve their goals. Both believed that the ends justified any means, no matter how horrific. Marika shattered the Elden Ring itself, rather than accept a world that didn't conform to her will. Miquella would have done something far worse. He would have left the world intact, but hollowed out its soul, creating a pristine shell with nothing real inside. The withering of the Haligtree takes on new meaning when we understand Miquella's true intentions. It was never meant to last, never meant to be the true sanctuary it promised. It was a lure, a honeyed trap that drew in the desperate and vulnerable, gathering followers who would later become the foundation of his new order. Every Albinauric who died reaching for its branches, every misbegotten who perished defending its roots, they were all sacrifices on the altar of Miquella's ascension. He might have wept for them, might have genuinely mourned their loss, but he wouldn't have stopped. Gods don't get to stop. Sainton. Trina's plea for us to kill Miquella is the most heartbreaking element of this entire narrative. She represents everything good that once existed within him, the gentle aspect that truly wanted to help rather than control. By abandoning her, Miquella didn't just cast aside a part of himself, he murdered his own compassion to make room for a twisted version of love that brooks no refusal. Saint Sane. Trina knew that godhood would be a prison for Miquella, trapping him in an eternal loop of enforcing his will upon others, never able to experience genuine connection again, because how can you truly connect with someone who has no choice but to love you? The experiments we've traced through this journey reveal a pattern of escalation. From needles to trees to cocoons to charm magic to forced resurrection to attempted godhood, each step took Miquella further from his original purpose. He became so focused on the destination that he never questioned whether the path itself was corrupting what he sought to achieve. This is the danger of unchecked genius, combined with immortal patience and childlike absolutism. Miquella never learned that sometimes the cure is worse than the disease, that preserving choice, even the choice to suffer, is what makes beings truly alive. The community's evolving understanding of Miquella reflects the brilliance of From Software Storytelling. Before the shadow of the Erdtree expansion, many players saw him as a tragic figure, a victim of Mohg's predation whose good intentions were cut short by cruel fate. The revelation of his true nature doesn't invalidate those earlier interpretations, it deepens them. Miquella is still tragic, but the tragedy is self-inflicted. He's still a victim, but of his own machinations. His intentions were good until he decided that intention alone justified any action. We must also consider what Miquella's story says about the nature of godhood in Elden Ring's cosmology. Every god we encounter is fundamentally broken in some way. Marika is literally shattered. The greater will has abandoned the lands between entirely. The outer gods circle like vultures, each pushing their own agenda through mortal pawns. Perhaps achieving godhood requires abandoning the very qualities that make existence meaningful. Perhaps Miquella's transformation into a charming tyrant wasn't a corruption of the process, but its intended outcome. Gods, by their very nature, cannot afford doubt, cannot permit disagreement, cannot tolerate anything that challenges their absolute vision of reality. The lingering mystery surrounding Miquella's experiments continue to fuel speculation within the lore community. What would have happened if his plan had succeeded completely? Would the age of compassion have been eternal, or would it eventually collapse under the weight of its own contradictions? Could anyone have resisted his charm indefinitely, or would even the strongest will eventually succumb? These questions have no definitive answers, and that ambiguity is intentional. It forces us to grapple with the philosophical implications of Miquella's vision, to decide for ourselves whether eternal peace is worth the price of eternal servitude. The transformation from healer to tyrant didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual slide, each compromise making the next one easier, each experiment pushing the boundaries a little further. Miquella probably told himself that each escalation was necessary, that the suffering he caused in the present would be justified by the paradise he would create in the future. This utilitarian calculus, taken to its extreme, can justify any atrocity if the promised benefit is great enough. Miquella's experiments teach us that the road to tyranny is paved not with evil intentions, but with good ones pursued without restraint or reflection. As we reach the conclusion of this deep dive into Miquella's dark evolution, we're left with uncomfortable questions about the nature of compassion itself. Can true kindness exist without the freedom to choose cruelty? Is peace meaningful if it's enforced rather than chosen? Miquella would answer yes to both questions, would argue that the elimination of suffering justifies the elimination of choice. But his withered tree, his abandoned other half, his hollowed-out followers all testify to the emptiness of that vision. They stand as monuments to the danger of pursuing perfection without accepting the messy, painful, beautiful imperfection that makes life worth living. The Golden Prince, who began by trying to heal his sister's rot, ended by trying to rot the entire world's capacity for independent thought. The experiments that started with needles and prayers concluded with mind control on a cosmic scale. The sanctuary that promised shelter became a factory for producing devotees stripped of their own will. This is Miquella's true legacy. a cautionary tale about how the desire to help can transform into the need to control, how compassion without wisdom becomes tyranny with a gentle smile. Thank you, lore seekers, for joining me on this exploration of one of Elden Ring's most complex and disturbing narratives. The story of Miquella reminds us that in From Software's worlds, nothing is ever as simple as it first appears, and sometimes the most beautiful facades hide the darkest truths. If this deep dive into the shadow of the Haligtree has given you new perspective on the lands between, please consider subscribing to Keen 7 Lore. Your support allows us to continue uncovering these hidden stories, piecing together the fragments of lore that reveal the true nature of these incredible worlds. Until next time, may your journey through the lands between be filled with discovery, and may you always question the kindness of those who would remake the world in their own image. Remember, in a world where gods can rewrite reality itself, the most dangerous person isn't the one who threatens you with a blade, but the one who promises to take away all your pain if only you'll stop asking questions and start obeying. Stay curious, stay critical, and above all, stay free.